Alright, today I'm going to do a case study on Pytorch, which is one of the clearest examples of a successful open source project. So Pytorch was created in 2016 by Meta's AI research team, and in 2022, its governance moved to the Linux Foundation, and today it is the default deep learning framework. I'm sure most of you have heard or perhaps even used this technology. So the origin story. It was built by researchers for researchers. It was co-created by Sumit Chintala, who is a VP/fellow at Meta. And what's important was that it was a small team and that it was released as an open source project. It wasn't built as a product, but rather it was built because FAIR's own researchers needed something more flexible than what existed at the time. And that's not just a pattern that you see here, but it's a pattern that you see in a lot of successful open source projects. The creators were also usually the first users of these projects. So this is the problem that it solved. Before Pytorch, the dominant approach was static computational graphs. You had to define your entire model first, and then run your data through it. But that definitely made debugging painful. You couldn't easily inspect values, and it definitely ran into issues mid-computation. It was also slower to experiment, and that's usually what matters most in research. So afterwards, Pytorch introduced what's called define by run. This is a graph that builds itself as your code runs, kind of like normal Python. You can print and inspect values at any point, and that made research iteration much faster. So this begs the question, why was it open source? Why give something like this away for free? So Meta had no obligation to open source this, but they did so for three reasons. The first was for faster feedback. Since thousands of external researchers would be looking at this, would be using it, they actually ended up finding a ton of bugs and edge cases that Meta's own team would not have been able to catch it by themselves. And the second is community contributions. Outside developers, they added features, optimizations, which is basically just free R&D. And the third is talent and reputation. Being behind the tool research, excuse me, being behind this critical tool that so many researchers loved made Meta AI a recruiting magnet. Everyone wanted to work there. And obviously, this led to a tremendous amount of growth and adoption. Pytorch overtook its main rival TensorFlow in research paper usage around 2018 to 2019. And today it's used in the vast majority of deep learning papers. It's also become the framework of choice taught in most university machine learning courses, and it was adopted by major players like Tesla, under Andrej Karpathy, for example. And this growth continually to compound as more users met more tutorials, more Stack Overflow answers, more pre-trained models, which in turn attracts even more users. Governance. In 2016, Pytorch was released by Meta AI. From 2017 to 2021, it grew explosively. More and more companies and universities became dependent on it. Then, in 2022, Meta moved governance to the Linux Foundation, forming the independent Pytorch Foundation. And why does this matter? Neutral governance signals that no single company can unilaterally change or restrict the project. This essentially builds trust with everyone who's now depending on it, including Meta's competitors. The ecosystem effect. Because Pytorch is open Anyone can build on top of it without asking for permission or paying a license fee. So for instance, Hugging Face's entire transformer library is built on Pytorch, and that is just in one example of a tremendous software that wouldn't exist for free if an open source tool like Pytorch wasn't available. And so this is a network effect that's unique to open source. Not just the users, but the ecosystem itself compounds upon each other. So ultimately, what made this free and open source software project succeed? First, it solved a real problem. It was built to fix the pain that creators felt themselves, not a solution looking for a problem. It had real corporate backing, Meta funded full-time engineers, infrastructure, and long-term investment. They also had neutral governance. Moving it to the Linux Foundation removed single company control and built trust. And it had that compounding community aspect. So the final takeaway, open source won because the incentives lined up. Researchers got a genuinely better, more flexible tool. Meta gained influence over the AI ecosystem, plus recruiting and reputation. The community gained real ownership through independent governance, and none of these groups had to lose. It was a net positive for everyone, and that's what made it durable.